Good evening, brothers, sisters, and siblings, and welcome back to a very sleeveless episode of the Vibe Too Many podcast. I am your host, KJ Collelo, in literal 100-degree heat right now, joined as always by...
But we persevere. My name is Ashton Byrne.
With sleeves.
With sleeves.
With the sleeves on this guy. We're back, baby.
We are back.
Back and sweatier than ever.
We're very sweaty.
We talked about Toy Story last week. Alice, very excited that she made an appearance on the podcast, by the way.
Congrats, Alice.
I woke up, this is how I woke up this morning, to a comment on the podcast video and an Instagram post on the Vibe Too Many Instagram of her being like, I'm in this episode, meanwhile it's me yelling at her.
Just like in real life.
Yeah, it is very similar to real life. Anyway, we talked last week about some toys and stuff. We said we were going to bring out a toy to show and tell, despite the fact I kind of do that every week, because I have these two lads.
Yeah.
But I do have a different one.
Who's showing off first?
Do you want to go first? Because you were excited.
Yes.
Among Us!
This is Sus. His name is Sus. He is my Among Us. He went with me to college, too. He's friends with Lotso.
Why did you buy him?
Because he's sus.
Anyway, my choice.
Where's your toy?
Well, I have something else planned, but I do just want to say I got KFC for lunch today, so I got the Supergirl. And then for my actual one, and I apologize because I do have to like stitch him up a little bit, but I got this frog.
He's cool.
This is his name is Posey.
Why does he need Posey?
So my brother gave me Posey for Christmas, and on Christmases I have to deal with my racist ass uncle. So The way my family combats that is we all get really drunk and really high. But I started just kind of like playing with him, and I made him like look like he's a catcher. Actually, it would be like that. He'd be right-handed, right? And there was when I was growing up, very famous catcher named Buster Posey. So I named him Posey.
Okay, that's cute.
Alright, well, now that all the nonsense is over with, we come to you with kind of a big episode. It's strange, like, going from this intro now to, like, the beginning of this, but we are doing something we haven't done yet before. I always knew there would be an episode where we talk about one movie and one movie alone. But it needed to be the right movie. Then, I want to say like 2 to 3 weeks ago, from the time of recording this, very, 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 very tragic and upsetting news hit both Ash and I, that the comic artist, Marjane Satrapi, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. It's Satrapi, I'm sorry, had unfortunately passed away. And that came as like, not only a shock, but as like kind of a blow to both Ash and I.
To the comics community as a whole.
For those of you who don't know, Marjane Satrapi wrote this comic book right here, Persepolis, which is like a landmark graphic novel. It's one Ash and I have talked about multiple times on this podcast. So in 2007, Marjane Satrapi herself had co-directed an adaptation of her own graphic novel into an animated film by the same name, Persepolis.
Which is, I feel like, uncommon. Because I feel like when a lot of these adaptations happen, it's oftentimes, this is kind of partially, not 100%, there's other reasons, but partially why Art Spiegelman said he never agreed to an animated adaptation of Mouse, because Mouse was always made to be a comic. It wasn't made as a stepping stone to a movie from people who see comics as
a lesser form.
Yes, or as, like, one step in the process of becoming a movie.
Right.
Like, this is the final form that it is in. But this is completely a different situation entirely, where the person making the graphic novel is heavily involved in the film process. Yes.
You can tell she's never trying to lessen the art form of graphic novels in this. It is almost its own separate thing. She adds things to the movie that aren't in the graphic novel. There are things in the graphic novel that aren't in there. And because they're both autobiographical, you get almost two different, I don't want to say versions of her, but you get more information on her if you do both. But you can go into either without having experience the other. So yeah, obviously today we're talking our first ever solo movie is Persepolis, in honor of Marjane Satrapi. I couldn't think of like
Marjane
Marjane.
Satrapi.
I'm sorry.
Marjane Satrapi. Rest in peace.
I couldn't think of someone more deserving. She was such an influential part of like my teenage years when I was getting into the whole punk movement and everything like that, and trying to learn how to be more subversive. And I've talked about before how I'm kind of ashamed of high school me, because I was very much like the kind of edgelord white guy that I look like. On the inside, I wanted to be like, this fucking Joe Strummer-esque, and this graphic novel really helped me like eventually get to that point.
I read it mostly around the same time I got into Mouse. Around the same time right after I read, either around the same time as when I read Watchmen, where I realized comics books can be so much more than superhero beats bad guy and wins the day.
Adding to the list of new things we're doing for this episode, usually, I hope it never comes across this way, but usually these podcasts are actually fairly structured, where before Ash and I start recording, I write out an outline of just things I want to talk about, and then we kind of riff off of those. Sometimes that adds new ideas we've gotten while talking. Sometimes we, cut some of the talking points and add different ones and do all of that. And it's kind of just to keep our mind from wandering so much. If we were to show you full intros, Ash and I go off the rails quite a bit. For this one, I felt an outline wouldn't justify this whole thing.
We wouldn't be able to get everything in a single outline, yeah.
And also, just because I wanted this episode to be more conversational, rather than like, we're talking about what we liked about the movie and what we didn't like about the movie. I wanted this to be more like philosophical, I guess, is the way to put it. Because
I feel like that's the way she would intend us to view the work.
Yeah, we're kind of like the hippies she makes fun of in here. One of the things I do want to say to start off, and this is about both the graphic novel and the movie, I talked about how this was huge when I was getting into not just punk rock music. I've been listening to punk rock music since I was a little kid. As I mentioned, when I was getting into the whole punk rock like movement, I said this was a big stepping stone. But if you really like go into this and read it, she makes fun of a lot of the punk rockers of the time.
Which is fair.
It is, and that's kind of what I was going to. You might be like, this kind of speaks out against the punk rock movement, but I would balk against that. She balks against nihilism, which was a plague of the punk rock movement.
It reminds me, so two thoughts. It reminds me of a James Baldwin quote where people were saying how he was... Because, James Baldwin, a black, gay essay writer, one of the greatest writers of all time, not just an essay writer, an amazing writer, novelist.
If Beale Street could talk, that's his...
He was kind of the target for a lot of FBI investigations because he was seen as, like, radical, and, they sort of questioned his allegiance to the United States. And he said something along the lines of, I love this country so much that I have the right to critique it in all the ways it deserves to be critiqued.
Yes.
I feel like it's coming from a place of, she loves punk. She loves hardcore music.
The counterculture.
She loves the counterculture. She's loved the counterculture her whole life.
Yeah, she talks about, as a child, almost getting arrested for having an Iron Maiden tape.
Yeah. That's more punk rock than anything these guys have done. It's making fun of people in the West who have all of, like, they have the aesthetics, and they might play the politics, but they don't actually, like, do it. Because in the movie, we see these punk rock kids, they're complaining about going home, they're going to Brazil, they're going on vacation. Oh, I have to go on vacation!
With my family.
My parents suck, they're part of the bourgeoisie! Oh, and meanwhile, Marjane has to, like, call her family. She doesn't know whether, like... when she's calling it, like, what's going on, if they're, like, gonna get arrested. Like, she can't see her family.
Yeah, a lot of the time, she can't go back to her
She's
own country.
living these politics. They get to cosplay however the fuck they want. Whether they're serious about it or not.
It's very much an idea of, like, look, I get it. Your parents are annoying, and the world sucks. But the way you go about it is so self-centered. You are all about... Actually, let me pull the exact X-ray specs quote. So in the second verse of the song goes, my facade is just a fake, shock horror, no escape, sensationalism for the feed, caricatures are what you breed. And that's like the guys she's dealing with here. It's these people, you know, who have the mohawks and the leather jackets and the spikes and everything. You're taking that with almost this air of, like, privilege growing up. And I'm aware I am a white guy talking about privilege right now. I'm a part of that.
So am I.
These people she talks about, and it's, you know, the punks in this section, and then it's the hippies a little later on, and the beatniks and everything. All of these countercultures that were around in the 70s and 80s, so many of them wanted to put on the clothes and write the poetry and write the music, but they didn't want to do the stuff it took to, like, really amplify that.
Because it's not romantic to, like, not treat somebody as, like, alien.
And I think that's something she talks about in the book as well. She talks about how a whole bunch of her friends were kind of like, oh, we're friends with the Iranian, you know?
Yeah.
Like, almost...
No, and they bring it up in the movie, too, where it's like, everybody here just sees me as, like, the noble savage.
Meanwhile, I mean, she talks about her childhood, and she had strife through it. She, you know, she was dealing with a whole bunch of shit during and post the Islamic Revolution, during the multiple wars and shit that was going on in Iran that is still going on to this day. A whole lot of times she talks about her childhood, though. It's not that she's this, you know, savage that hasn't experienced the joys of the Western world. She had fun with her parents and her grandmother. She listened
to Iron Maiden
and Michael Jackson and stuff. Like, she's not a barbarian just because she's from over there. She had to fight for more, but that doesn't make her, like, any less normal than all of us. And I think it's a really interesting concept of, specifically when I was watching the movie, I am an American white, straight, cis guy. And there is stuff that I related to her in her story. I didn't have to live through being bombed. But also when I was a little kid, when my country was invading Iran, I remember specifically thinking that there was never a time the U.S. wasn't at war. Like, I thought from 1776... up until, 2008 or whenever I had these thoughts, we were in constant, nonstop conflict with just a different enemy or whatever every time. And I'm sure you remember this time in the back of your mind, Ashton. The early 2000s were a time of just misery.
I remember a lot of propaganda.
A lot of propaganda. But it was a scary, nihilistic time to be alive.
For watching this violence being committed in our name in a country miles and miles away to people we've never met who are probably not that different from us.
That's what I was gonna say.
For what? For nothing. For nothing.
You watch this movie, you read this comic book, you listen to Marjane speak, you're like, oh, we have so much in common.
Yeah.
What's that? You love 80s metal and punk rock? Fuck yeah, so do I. You were scared of all the war and violence growing up? Fuck yeah, so was I.
I think the part 2 where they talk about, like, how religion was used also as, like, a propaganda tool, that I remember especially.
I mean, it's
from the U.S.
It's never been worse than it is now, too. Stateside.
I remember when I was in middle school, my teacher at the time said that they didn't like Obama because he was a Muslim, and that meant that he was a terrorist, and that also meant that he had concentration camps in the Midwest. She said this to a room of 7th graders at a very, very super Bible-thumping Christian middle school that, I swear to God, every fucking day I would walk in and somebody would say some, like, crazy Islamophobic shit. It was just, like, this treated like the standard.
Henry Rollins talked about traveling to, I want to say it was Iraq. Henry Rollins, the fucking lead singer of Black Flag, like a punk rock icon, but also a very well-traveled, very intelligent man, talks about going and meeting just the locals there, and having, like, an honest conversation of, like, they were nervous to meet him at first, and Henry Rollins was like, what's this interaction gonna be like? And then being like, oh, yeah, your government. And he's like, yeah, my government, but also your government. And they're like, yeah, no, we understand. The people have so much in common with each other all over the world. We have more in common with each other. We have more in common with our brothers, sisters, and siblings in Iran, in Venezuela, in Palestine, than we will ever have in common with the people making decisions. As people, not as, like, strife, I mean. We're not seeing the same things Palestinians are seeing.
No, absolutely not.
We all want the same things, which Henry Rollins himself put as a fistful of 50s and a day without fear. Something else to keep in mind, and again, it's part of this too, where the USA took advantage of Iran being in a weird spot in between leaders and what was going to happen with the religions and everything to basically force the Shah into power.
Yeah.
But also, when they talk about, like, oh, gay marriage isn't legal here, or this isn't legal here, gay marriage was not legalized in this country on a federal level until 2013.
Yes.
We were in middle school. I remember where I was. Did we, as a country, deserve to get bombed to eternity in 2012? You know?
As little kids. As little gay kids.
Just, that doesn't give... People will learn. If there's one thing... And I know I am, angry dude, but I try to stay positive. And if there's one thing I've learned in 26 grueling years on this planet and in this country, is that humans cannot help but develop over time. We're still adapting. And yes, a lot of the time it feels like we're being dragged back. And we are being dragged back a lot of the time. But when you go back to those core ideas I just talked about, the fistful of 50s and a day without fear, holy shit, are we so alike across the globe? And are we so willing to accept things? If we just let go of the powers controlling us.
In the movie, she meets, like, so many different people when she moves. She makes a difficult move from Iran to Austria? Like, she is living that experience of, like, learning about different
cultures.
Just learning, just
people.
Cultures. Just meeting.
And meanwhile, she talks about how in this, all these people, she's learning about this new culture and everything. None of these people are listening to her about her culture, though.
It's all, like, passive listening.
And I mean, they're asking her questions, but they're not asking, like...
They're asking about her lead her to an answer. Yes.
And I think that's such a... we will talk about the strife she faces in here, and all of this, and the bravery and all that, but to look at somebody just through this level of suffering is misguided. Because, yes...
It is.
Marjane had to deal with so much suffrage in her life, but she wasn't just her suffering, she was also her joy. She was also the thing she loved. She is as much drawing cartoons as she was growing up in Iran.
All of it made a whole person.
One of my favorite things is we just passed Pride Month. One of the most powerful things we've done with Pride, in this country, but not because of the country, but just because of the people, is they refuse to let Pride just be a story of strife. The Stonewall riots are a part of it. The AIDS epidemic is a part of it. But so is every fucking 80s club beat. So is Depeche Mode and Rainbows and dancing and partying. Because it's not one singular thing. No one thing is struggle. You have to have joy or else the struggle will crush you.
It reminds me of Portrait of Ross in L.A., where it's like this, like, conceptual art piece. Felix Gonzalez Torres is a creator of Portrait of Ross in LA, and it's this really interesting piece where it's like just a pile of candy in a corner, and you take the candy, and you take it with you, and the pile gets slower and slower, and it's meant to mimic the weight of Felix's partner as they were dying from AIDS.
Right.
And it's this tragic thing that happened that's communicated through, like, such a beautiful, like, visual and narrative, like, lens that it's not when you talk about it too, it's not just about like the fact that you suffered. It's like you're turning it into a work of art, literally.
Yeah. It's also the famous, Van Gogh discussion where it's like, oh, he had a struggle to create all this artwork. And I mean, he was in all his greatest works is while he was getting the proper help. But they were still also a part of his suffering. But he's able to turn them into joy. Marjane Satrapi was able to turn...
I also want to shout out Louis Wayne. He's often known as like the guy who drew cats because of his schizophrenia.
Right.
He had mental health issues, but you have to realize that he was in mental health institutions throughout a lot of his adult life, in like the 1800s. So you're talking about 1800s
same
mental
deal with
understanding, where like
Van Gogh, same deal with him.
Yeah. Also, the cats that look trippy were not a schizophrenia thing. It was a stylistic choice. Yes. So people say like, oh, well, is schizophrenia getting worse and he went insane and that made the art? No, he was a famous illustrator for many, many years. He was part of the reason cats became a household pet in the first place. Because he drew illustrations featuring cats. He drew a portrait of a cat and it's the quote, I'm so happy because everyone loves me. Which is like the most beautiful little drawing I've ever seen.
Art is this wonderful thing where a lot of great art, this very much included, is inspired by struggle. But whenever you're struggling, someone's like, oh, that creates good art. It's not until you come out the other side and you can look at the whole thing as a whole and what it means to you in your life that you can truly make this into something. This is not a story written during the Islamic Revolution. This is a story written after she had gone through a suicide attempt that is beautifully portrayed in both the graphic novel and the movie.
Very poignant.
Drawing me to tears both times. Last week, I talked briefly about the Iron Giant, but and I apologize if I start to tear up, because I tend to tear up when I talk about this. Knowing the story behind why Brad Bird wrote The Iron Giant, Ash, you might know, but for everyone else, Brad Bird's sister was shot and killed at a very young age, probably her 20s or something. And Brad Bird now has to live with this. And the way he was able to, reconcile with it is by asking himself, what if a gun didn't want to be a weapon? What if a gun didn't want to be a gun? And that's the Iron Giant. What if he didn't have to be that?
He didn't have to kill people. He didn't have to be a gun.
And but he didn't write it that day. It took time to come to terms with all of this.
He went to it on his own terms.
And that's something in this where it's like she had to go through stuff that as you're reading it, it's ripping your heart out. She doesn't get to see her family.
You want to give her a hug. Yeah.
She doesn't see her family.
You just want to give her a hug.
The last time she sees her grandmother, who she loved, was just in an airport saying goodbye, and she was gone 2 weeks later. Her country, her neighborhood, her house was bombed, and she didn't know if her family was okay. You have to come out on the other side to process that. And that's how you get something like this. That's how you get something like the movie.
I have had this experience too specifically in college, where I would draw just, I don't know, stuff for fun, because I thought it looked cool. And anytime, a professor would look at it and they'd be like, there's no narrative here, there's no story here, so I'm not really interested. And then I get talking about, my mom dying. I went through some trauma as a kid. I'm trans, everything dealing with that. And they're like, oh, you should write a book. You should write a book about that. And it's like, so you're telling me the only way I get to have a career and make money is if I prostitute my trauma off for you to read it.
To create art, you have to let someone into your soul. It is very vulnerable to create art. we, write 300 pages of some of the most vulnerable things she'd ever put. And just that thought of her not being able to process something is heartbreaking to me, human being to human being. I'm looking right now at the exact panels where she's talking about her attempt.
I was thinking also her talking about how she ended up homeless.
Yeah, that's another very sobering part.
That's another one where it's like,
and almost
you never
dying
know
out
how
on the
close
street,
to homelessness you are.
Yeah. You are one bad medical bill away most of the time. She's on the streets of Vienna, and you see her, like, picking cigarette butts off the ground, searching through trash cans for food. And I mean, Ashton, you've worked in New York as well. We've both have been there frequently. We see that every day.
I did want to bring up, there's like,
which one is that one?
The use of, like, so much black ink is, like, really interesting. I feel like it's not super common.
Her use of, like, black in this graphic novel, but also in the film,
to convey emotion.
Unbelievable. She makes black and white as pretty as the red on this cover or the blue on yours, you know?
Yes. Exactly. And it's so, like, it's able to convey so much emotion with just, like, 2 colors. Again, like, you can, like, feel this.
I mean, this entire graphic novel is in black and white. And it is still one of the most visually stunning graphic novels I've ever laid eyes on. Same deal with the movie, which does incorporate a little more color. That's only at specific points, though.
Very occasionally. It's very intentional about its use of color. Yeah. That's what I like about it.
But Ash and I mentioned this before we started recording. This might be the best looking animated film I've ever seen. Like, when it comes down to animation and style and everything like that, I don't think it gets better than this movie.
It uses the animated medium to really push the visuals of the comic in such an interesting way, where you're getting so much more life.
Mm-hmm. Rather than being supplemental to the comic, rather than the comic being one stop on the way to making a movie, it is almost complementary towards it.
Yes. There's this one, too. Marjane wakes up.
Oh, yeah.
She doesn't want to talk to God anymore.
This is actually one of the ones I was going to talk about. This conversation where she's almost damning God after her uncle had been murdered, and then her country's being bombed. I mean, when I talked earlier about how we across the world have a whole lot of similarities, how I felt the similarities in this too, this is also where it goes like, man, Ash and I, as I mentioned before, grew up in a very weird, depressing time, but we were never worried really about being bombed.
Bombed or like having like our family be like political prisoners?
Yeah, these were things we never worried about. I'm not saying protesters have never been arrested. It's not like we don't have political prisoners in America.
It's not like Delaney Hall isn't happening right now.
Exactly.
People literally getting arrested.
But
it's different.
It is. And I'm not even saying what we're doing now isn't like, it's almost like we're on the way to what they talk about here. But there is still more going on here.
Yeah.
And partially because of the US's backing, which she is not shying away from in this.
No, she makes it very, very clear that this is because of U.S. intervention.
On more than one occasion. And this is before, the early 2000s. She doesn't go into that stuff where we were invading Iran and Iraq and everything post 9/11. Or even fucking pre 9/11.
There's a quote from, I know it's in the movie, where the mom asks Dad if, when she was trying to move out of the country, she was asking, should we move to America? And I remember Dad saying something along the lines of, why, so we could be taxi drivers
Yeah.
and dishwashers. I think that's the difference. That line right there.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, when Marjane's father is talking about the history of the Shah in the beginning of the book as well, it is deliberately said, like, hey, the U.S. kind of caused this.
Yes.
Because they were like, hey, you give us the oil.
The U.S. and the British.
Yeah. You give us the oil, we give you ultimate power, and you get to be, the Shah.
Yeah.
So this is because of the U.S. and Britain, this is happening. And this book never shies away from that. This book talks about, all the issues in Iran in the 80s. And as I'm reading this, and as I'm watching this movie, I'm like, wow, they've never had a second to themselves. We've been constantly at war over here with the United States, with more countries in the Middle East. There's always someone with their hands in the pot there. You can still look at it like, man, they've always been fighting just to, survive, Which is ironic because after Marjane's suicide attempt, she starts singing "Eye of the Tiger" in the movie. It's a very needed, funny scene.
Yes.
With her kind of off-key singing, because we just watched this woman. It's a little more cryptic in the movie, but you're all adults. You know what they're talking about. As in the comic book where she talks about the different methods she thought of. But yeah, Iran has spent its entire existence just fighting to let itself be there and progress. And we are already back on our bullshit. I'm laughing, but it's more of like a, uncomfortable laugh.
This is fucked up.
Yeah. Like, we were occupying so much of the Middle East until longer than you really realize, because even after the official fighting had stopped, we were still stationed there. And then we fucked up pulling the troops back, too. Like, we fucked everything up there, and as soon as we're actually, officially out of the Middle East, we went right back at them. For fucking
For
what?
No reason.
Because Israel asked? It's heartbreaking that it's not stopping. And this isn't, to me, a partisan thing, because it's been on both sides we've been doing this. I shouldn't say on both sides, on both parties.
Yeah.
We've been bungling this. Bush invading, Obama continuing it, bombing schools, bombing
It's all the same, yeah. It's just the same system, but just with different people. I mean, it's like the same thing as the fucking nihilistic punks.
Yeah, it is. You're 100% right. This book starts in 1979. And in 2026, the same bullshit's fucking happening. I mean, do you know how different the world was in 79 versus now? To put this in, the dumbest context... We
wouldn't be having this podcast.
No, but 79. To put this in the dumbest possible context, that was the same year as the holidays, the Star Wars holiday special.
That's crazy. That's a long time ago. My
dad was 8. That's a fundamentally different existence in the world. But for Iran, they have stayed under strife that entire time. I don't think there's a negative thing I could say about this graphic novel or about this movie. At times, I don't think we get the full scope of what is happening in other places, what our actions are causing over there. And reading something like this, watching something like the movie, is such a powerful, we get to live through their eyes for a moment. And being able to see the consequences...
Person to person.
Of... When I say our, I do mean ours as a country. I don't think Ashton's going over there and negotiating fucking oil deals. But the consequences of our actions... for every bomb we drop, that's a family who will never see their house again. that is a child walking down the street who sees a dead body in the rubble.
The great thing that this book does is it's the similar thing that Mouse does too, where it takes this tragedy that people love to talk about very impersonally, and it attaches people and faces and lives to this event. That it's like these were people. These were people with families. They had families, they had lives, they had interests.
They danced, they loved music.
And they're gone.
And just like that.
They're gone.
All because of what?
If you gain nothing else from this episode, just think about your fellow human, no matter where they are.
Yeah.
Please.
I mean, we talked about it up top. We have so much more in common with the people being killed than the people doing the killing. Across the globe. A rather sobering episode of the Vibe Too Many podcast, huh?
Yes.
We lost not only a beautiful artist, but a beautiful soul. You know, we talk about, like, something every man, woman, child, and everything aside and in between should read, watch, listen to, whatever. I think everyone should sit down and read this graphic novel, should go watch the movie. You'll get the same ideas from it.
At least once.
Like, this is the art you should be interacting with, because it's so personal, it's so vulnerable. I've never believed in an afterlife, partially because that thought's never been comforting to me. If there is, I hope that, very selfishly, I hope that she's, here watching the world and realizing that this conversation's happening. That it's not all doom and gloom. Yes, there's so much darkness in the world, but partially because of her, there is an upside. There is light at the end of the tunnel for all of this. Well, it would feel weird to do like a pledge, wouldn't it?
What do you even pledge for?
Yeah, to do like a silly pledge where, like, we showed off our toy. Anyway, yeah, that was a rather emotional episode of the Vibe Too Many podcast. I'm glad
it's been in a very. You're glad?
I'm glad. I am very glad, and I'm glad it got to be on this. Something that was so impactful to both you and I, and our upbringing, and the way we think, and the way we interact with art, especially.
I'm glad as well.
Yeah.
That it was. I feel like it worked out perfectly.
But before we head out, there is a big rest in peace, and so it goes to
rest in peace, Marjane. Rest in peace,
Marjane Satrapi.
Marjane Satrapi.
Well, Ash, thanks for coming and crying with me over a graphic novel we both hold so dear.
It's been a very sweaty vibe.
Definitely too many.
Too many sweats.
I've been KJ Collelo.
I'm Ashton Byrne.
And
I'm gonna go sit in front of an air conditioner.
And probably for the most relevant one we've done so far. Bella ciao, y'all.
Bella ciao.